Well, he also, whoever.
Yes, actually take that word.
To be ready to roll.
Oh, right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming in person and online, all the folks who have been able to make it today. For those who are new to the group, I know we've got a couple of new folks who had asked if they could get information about the meeting and participating in it. I'm Laura Campbell with Michigan Farm Bureau. I'm serving as one of your co-chairs this afternoon. I'm going to pull up our agenda real quick so that I can see what I'm doing here. First thing we're going to do is we'll run through roll call and we'll start with folks in the room, and then we'll what I'll do is since we're not requiring locations for folks who are participating remotely, I'm going to read off the names that I see and then ask people to identify themselves who are participating by phone. So let's go ahead if we can, and we'll start with roll call in the room, and Brian will wrap up with you, and I'll start over here to my left.
Hello, I'm Christine Spitzley with Boyd Gemma Transfers.
I'm Jim Nicholas with Nicholas H2O.
Rachel Proctor with Consumers Energy.
Holly Turner, Michigan Potato Industry Commission.
Tom Frazier, local government.
Joe Wallace, Ottawa County Public Utilities, subbing for Fastest Damage.
Megan Tinsley, Michigan Environmental Council.
Jay Wesley, DNR Fisheries Division.
Dave Hamilton, Nature Conservancy.
Hannah Arnett, Eagle.
Mel Eagle Water Use Assessment Unit.
James Swift, Eagle. Brian Burrows with Travel Unlimited.
Great. So that's the folks that we've got here in the room. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. Let's look and see who we've got online. I've got two phone numbers, and if you don't mind unmuting and identifying yourselves, I've got one that ends in 71.
Hi, hello, my name is Numera.
I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
Numera.
Did you catch that, Jim? Say it real slow and real clear.
Full name,
Okay, Numera.
full name.
Okay,
It's with an N, Numera.
okay,
The-
thank you.
the-
Sorry about that. The sound
No,
quality
you're
is,
fine, it's a hard name.
yeah, the sound quality is not great here in the room. And then my other phone number is one that ends in 69.
That's me, Dave Lush.
Dave, all right. So then the other folks that I'm seeing participating are, we've got Hannah Arnett here, Jeremiah Asher. Who is our BN guest? Who is that?
That is Bud Norman.
Hi, Bud.
Hi,
I've
how
got
you doing?
James Swift here in the room. Emily Finnell, Chance Ford, Grant Poole, Ralph Hefner, Ross Helmer, Joel Henry, John Yelich, Clay Dupree, Corey Sanders, Andy LeBaron, Mike Frederick. I've got Jim Mills here in the room. Moth, past Moth, is it, which one's the first name and which one's the last name?
Moth is the first name.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. It's all right. So
Oh, that's
Moth, Lena Pappas, Steve Kohler, Sherry Phelan, Todd Feenstra, Austin York, and Adam Swickle. Is there anybody who's online who I have not called or who's participating that I missed? All right, hearing none. Hopefully you guys received our agenda for today. And what I would like to do now is see if there's anybody who's got items that they need to add to that agenda or things that they need to amend for today's agenda.
Laura,
Yes, sir.
I didn't see on the agenda the spreadsheet, the updated spreadsheet for the funding for the 2020 recommendations. So I don't know if you want to do that under this public comment period or somewhere else on the agenda.
Because you guys have updates to that spreadsheet, right?
Correct.
Okay. can we add that to the agenda after the first public comment and before we get to committee chair reports?
Yep.
All right, sounds good. Any other additions or changes we need to make to the agenda for today? All right. And then what I need to see is hopefully you also received a copy of the minutes from our last meeting. If you did not, or if you're following along online, you should also be able to see those on the Water Use Advisory Council website. All of those materials have been posted. Any changes or edits or amendments to the minutes from our October meeting?
Sure.
Yes,
Just a small typo on page 4, towards the bottom, the paragraph where Cliff provided a clarification. The very end of that paragraph, they've got, $10 million all running together. So that should be separated out.
Thank you, appreciate that. Make sure and get that corrected. Any other amendments or corrections to the minutes? All right, so we'll go ahead and make that correction to the minutes, and we'll keep rolling forward in our agenda for today. Get back to this because I absolutely cannot read the agenda when it's posted online. All right, next part that we've got is, excuse me, is our public comment. We have 2 public comment periods for this meeting. The first one we offer for items that are on the agenda. The next one, which will come at the toward the end of the meeting, can be about any topic that anybody wants to bring up, so long as hopefully it's related in some way to water use. Does anyone have public comments they'd like to make about agenda items for today? And if you're online, and can't get unmuted quick enough, you can raise your hand. We've got a few people who are monitoring the online participation, and hopefully will yell if I miss it. All right, I am seeing none. So, James, if you'd like to kind of slide right on into talking about the updates that you've got to the budget. So this is related to, we discussed this at our last meeting in October, related to how, how we're looking at the potential for being able to spend the appropriation that we received. If you guys remember, we received $10 million for operations and completing projects from the 2020 Water Use Advisory Council report, plus a separate appropriation for the Michigan Geological Survey of $3 million to continue on and be able to provide federal match for their mapping program.
So we're just gonna take a couple of minutes. I know we want to get to the committee report. So I'm just gonna hit on the things that we've changed. And then after this meeting today, we'll be able to get everyone a copy of this revised spreadsheet. So you'll be able to kind of look at it yourself. But let's see, down in row 10, I believe was the first one where this is where we've been talking about getting more USGS pages in, and we had thrown around the number of 50. What we have done now is we've done 2 things. Split out the appropriation for the existing gauges, so that's kind of in, I believe, row 9. And then in the following row, we have kind of revised the estimates based on the addition of 20 new gauges. And those would be kind of ramped up over a period of time, but it includes kind of the installation cost and the ongoing maintenance of those gauges. So those numbers you'll see kind of reflected there now. Obviously, it's not something that's going to be up year 1, so this will be kind of phased in given the availability of kind of workforce on the USGS side. So you'll see kind of some changes in that row. And next, I think the next one is changed was when we got into row 17, we got into lots of talk about kind of the monitoring network and how we're gonna do that. So we cleaned this up, broken it into kind of the
Row 16.
row 15 and 16. It's broken it into the joining the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. Shows the first year kind of appropriation to kind of get into that network. The good news about joining that network, of course, is that we could be, make ourselves, future funding availability is potential there. And then we've kind of broken out the second row is to, you know, once we kind of get some grant money, we might be able to then kind of improve as far as getting more actual wells into the system. So we've started a discussion with USGS and reestablishing some of their existing wells. And this will tell us kind of the parameters under which we might be able to kind of add wells in the future, kind of under that program. So we have that clarified there.
If I can, James,
Okay.
cell 16E, those costs are based on a proposal from USGS from back in 2015, 2016. So Eagle just met with USGS and Ralph Hefner is going to be updating that proposal, keeping those costs the same, but that would be heading towards entering into a new joint funding agreement to have USGS install additional monitoring wells around the state.
So the costs are for the agreement to install the new wells, or the costs are to join the monitoring network? Because I know that was a question that came up last time.
The cost in row 16, the cost in row 16 are for installation of new monitoring wells and operation and maintenance.
Okay.
And
so
then
you
in
don't
row
have-
17, we're still developing a project budget to apply for a grant from USGS for Eagle to become a new data provider.
So we don't
Join
have any
the National Groundwater Monitoring
Yeah,
Network.
no specified cost.
Okay, but for the costs that were identified and that we pulled from Ralph Hefner's 2015, 2016 report, how many monitoring wells is that?
They want to work, my understanding, and if Ralph is online, he can jump in. My understanding, their goal is that they would like to have at least 2 monitoring wells per county. In additional, they may put more wells in higher water use areas.
Okay, so we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood between 170 to 200 monitoring wells?
I did not. believe
Yeah,
it.
this is Ralph. I'll chime in here. The overall goal of the program is to kind of have a slow and steady accretion of wells to the network. And the first step would be to evaluate existing old wells to see if, first of all, they're in good shape, we can find them. And second, are they in good contact with the aquifer materials? So we would do slug tests and what we call well integrity tests, looking at the change in water level with time after we add a known volume of water or a slug. It might be a piece of plastic that looks like a long PVC tube. So our goal is to add 10 wells to the network every year. And 10% of those wells would be reporting water levels on real time. You might think that water level responds relatively slowly to stresses, whether it's pumping or whether it's recharge events or whatever. But in certain areas, whether it's very shallow or in areas perhaps characterized by karst or other underground features, water levels can respond relatively quickly and even approach land surface. So some of those wells would be, again, outfitted with continuous recorders that transmit either by satellite or by cell phone. So again, the goal is 10 wells per year. Again, trying to utilize existing wells first. And if we really have an area where there are no existing wells, that would be installing new wells. And as we talked earlier this week with Eagle, they have the capacity to drill wells for this program that would greatly reduce the time, effort, and contracting side that we would have to go through on the USGS to do it ourselves. So long term, again, we'd like 2 wells per county, plus an additional 30 or so wells that could be installed in the high water use areas or areas that are of concern, not only the Water Use Advisory Council, but also to a stakeholder group that might include some of you and certainly state and local representatives. long story short, sorry.
Well, that's good. That's needed.
I have a question. So the last meeting, we kind of talked about this, there was some ambiguity. And we had thrown out the idea of, instead of 2 wells per county, focusing really on the areas of the state where water usage pressure is high, maybe areas of cold transitional streams, sensitive areas, because I understand the reasoning behind wanting to get baseline for every county, but at this point, I feel like we're very well behind when it comes to gathering data. And we have some very sensitive areas in the state. Like, doesn't it make more sense to focus on the sensitive areas first and then build the program out to include other counties later?
So I think, and then others can join in, I think part of the thought is, since the regulatory program is based on stream flow, the stream gauges in those areas that were tight are the most important information we have. Since we don't have an ability currently to factor in groundwater level kind of monitoring into decision-making, you're totally agree that that is important information to have kind of down the road. And we may decide that we start to focus on some of those areas in the future. But I think as far as the decision-making tool, the stream gauges in those areas are the most important information yet. And the monitoring wells would be secondary.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, again, part of the work plan and the proposal that we put forward actually describes a development of a stakeholder group. And this stakeholder group will guide where these wells should be, whether they are, water table wells in unconsolidated materials, deep wells and bedrock aquifers in areas of high water use. Certainly, we could initially focus on that. But the overall goal is to kind of have a thermometer or some sort of indicator of the state's groundwater resources as a whole, and not necessarily just focus on the high water use areas. So yeah, certainly we could initially go after those areas, but again, the long-term goal would be to get some sort of indicator for the entire state.
All right, Todd, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. If we're looking for 2 wells per county, 83 counties, 166 wells, I think there's 26 active wells right now. So that leaves 140 at 10 a year. We're looking at about 14 years to get to 2 wells per county roughly, if I do the math right. Or over the next 3 years of the project money, that will get 30 new wells into the network or reactivated old wells. Am I stating that correctly?
Sounds right to me, Todd.
Okay, thank you.
And in our lifetimes, that sounds like a long time. I certainly won't be here, but I think that the cost levels are at the point. Again, this proposal was written at a relatively low and moderate level. We could bump up those dollar amounts and get more wells into the network quicker. But again, the sticker shock is already there, and it would cost a lot more money to do so. But certainly not without the outside the realm of discussion.
All right. Other questions before James moves on to the other parts of this spreadsheet?
Yeah, the only other change that we
Jim?
made was towns. Yeah,
Sorry, John Yelich, Michigan Geologic Survey. One of the things that we are doing in our mapping program is installing monitor wells at the same time. And we would see those being integrated into this program as well. So as James has talked about and Ralph had talked about, we just all need to meet together and talk about where we see that we're doing it, and Kelly as well, so we can see where we're providing the information right now, particularly our mapping program, because we are converting or going to be trying to convert as many of them over into monitor wells for those particular areas.
the only other thing I was gonna add was the column B, the header. We were asked to identify which recommendations are priority for Water Resources Division to implement. 1 through 5. with the understanding that several of those are going to be implemented concurrently. So it's not like we have to get one out of the way before we move to number two.
Right,
Well,
which I know is
we'll
tough,
be
'cause
getting
it's like,
the revised
which one's your
spreadsheet out
favorite
there.
children, right? All right,
Right, and we'll circulate that document to everybody. If you got follow-up questions, feel free just to reach out to us.
okay, thank you.
Give me 1 second, and then back to the slides.
Yeah, no problem. And while you're doing that, one of the things I'll make sure and point out is hopefully you guys got a chance to take a quick look at the, again, very rough draft report that I put together from materials that we've received from the committees already, plus trying to capture some of the conversations we've had about, we've got this money that we're gonna be implementing that was appropriated to work on council activities in 2022, which we are very grateful for. And we're also going to need to make sure that those initiatives have ongoing funding too. So everything that we've got here that's going to be handed out with this spreadsheet is going to be updated in that report. So those numbers will be corrected and trued up to what we've got from Eagle, so that we don't have 6 different versions of numbers floating around out there. And everybody not quite sure what we're spending existing money on versus what we're asking for in terms of new funding. All right. I don't know where we're breaking off. Where do you wanna? Okay,
Yeah, I've got you through the chair report. So.
okay, very good. All right, so I guess with that, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and jump right into committee chair reports. And the first one that's on my list is for data collection.
Okay.
And I'll use this as a little bit of a segue too, in that the discussion that was just unfolding there about how to implement data collection needs, both what we asked for previously in the 2020 report, but all of the obvious larger needs that we all know of is next on deck at the data committee to really dig into. Megan's been trying tirelessly to find time, but as everybody can imagine, making new meetings in December is pretty difficult. Still at it. I think she sent a reminder yesterday to fill out, or 2 days ago, to fill out some polls. So our next meeting is where we will dig into all of these topics about where we're implementing past recommendations. Like for assessments and data. The teaser to haven't and our next meeting. So I'm gonna do my best to try to walk through this, and I don't want to spend more time than necessary if people are quite comfortable. I don't want to not spend some time explaining our one new recommendation. And I have a set of slides. I'll say that I think the slides, in order to get the font size up to appropriate levels, they're kind of blocked up into quite a few. Might be a little hard to follow through, so I'm going to try my best. I know I talked at the last meeting a bit, just narratively explaining what the new recommendation is about. But I thought I'd go back to a really old slide that I dug up from about, I think, 2011-ish, that was built to explain our current system of assessing water withdrawal impacts to stream networks. And this just serves as a good reminder, basically, that there's really, you can classify all of our assessment framework right now into three model buckets. There's a model that has to do with withdrawal, depth, size, rate of pumping. That then feeds some information into a stream flow model. That has to do with breaking streams up into different sizes based on their flow and the temperature characteristics. And then it was possible to develop a fish model, so that we used fish as our ecological metric of aquatic health, water dependent natural resource. And it worked well because the DNR had a lot of data sets through time of what fish species and at what abundance those fish species were in a lot of different rivers. And so they were able to statistically take a look and say, you know, rivers that have a certain drainage size, a certain base flow, a certain July mean temperature, lead to a certain kind of fish community. And when they were able to do that, you were able to look across those stream types and make predictions that if you have a stream of a certain size, certain base flow, and you diminish the base flow, the fish community would shift to looking like the fish community you find in a similar river that has less base flow or higher July temperature. So really the only keys is, to me, that I want to relay is there was a good basis of data for us to link withdrawals, streams, and an ecological metric of forward one slide. We, doing this for inland lakes has evaded us for some time. And for some very good reasons. But what we need to do is something analogous. We need to figure out what makes sense, what's reasonable, and we need to find something analogous for inland. And these are just random, you know, pictures and words and a couple of ideas to express what that's probably gonna entail, but it inherent to it is not that withdrawal model, but trying to find analogies for that stream flow model, but for lakes, and to see if we might find an ecological metric that makes sense too. And, you know, the reminder on the streams was that we were able, after using fish, stream flows and mean temperatures, we were able to break and classify the streams based on how their sensitivity to withdrawals. I think our group has continued to discuss and develop the concept that obviously we're going to need a way to think through and break up or classify inland lakes based on what kinds of responses to withdrawals we might expect from them. When we talk about stuff like that, we get into talking about is just based on size. Well, most of what the size that we have is actually area. Does that really do it, or do we need something? So we get into talking a lot about bathymetry of lakes. And the images at the bottom are just a couple hypothetical examples of different shapes of lakes that you could have. Obviously, it's only two-dimensional too, but you can see that a certain volume reduction of a lake might result in some very different scenarios. Some might be sensitive, some might not be that sensitive. We spent a lot of time through the past couple of years also thinking about how would we know things like whether a lake has a small amount of groundwater contribution or a large volume groundwater contribution. So we continue to try to think through ideas about whether that can involve some level of isotope analysis, water budget. Might there even be some ways with some other activities that parts of the state are working on with water table elevation mapping? And is, you know, you could, in theory, if we had some good ideas of what the water table was like in areas, we compare that to the maximum depths for the bathymetry of the lake, how far below the water table. Or is it perched like something? We don't have answers on that yet, but we have a lot of ideas to investigate. The end part is the metric. How would we want to measure the effect of a withdrawal? Right now, because we haven't ever kind of established this a nice, useful, reasonable ecological tie. The statute kind of, in my opinion, put a little placekeeper in there and based it on human use. So the lake is very shallow and you decrease it, the depth even, or you're going to affect some amount of recreation aspect. Same way with this accessibility. I think right now part 327 is kind of focused on this. But there may also be a way to find a usable ecological balance. And we've kicked around ideas and there's different options out there, whether it's a fish or plant community, algal community, chemistry. A lot of those I think can be in science literature tied to of the total zone of the lake. Actually, it's less than 10. So there's some prospects, but essentially where we're at now is, we don't have this all figured out. Discussed it, I think, in my opinion, about as much as people can discuss it without getting some next step happen to really go further. Next slide. This is where some of our recommendation got cut up into quite a few slides, and it's messy, it's not that visible. You all should have gotten a Word document, A lot of these first couple slides are just the background, just the pretext for why would we work on things? Why is this an important? Let's go ahead and click. This is actually just more background that started on the last slide. Go one. The third part of the background section. I think you can go one. One more. Okay. So I think there's still actually the recommendation still broken into a couple of slides, but here's the gist of it. And I hope everybody's had a chance to review it. But we're proposing that we need sort of three types of help. And first type would be engaging some limnological experts. You know, lakes classification, lake function. Some of that could be hydrogeology, some of it could be ecological. But we've tried in the past as our data committee and previous iterations of the water, we've tried to engage folks, and we've benefited some level of engagement here and there. But we could really use some and engage consistent background for some of this. The second need is what I call facilitative modeling. Just modeling, but think of it more on the conceptual terms. It's trying to make these linkages that I generally discussed. It's playing around, classifying out lakes and being able to see how that may work. Kind of a messy idea. It's kind of iterative, right? In that as you conceptually model out how you might classify lakes and how they might respond, it usually leads to some other questions, and you have to then jump over to the data side and say, well, that'd be a nice way, but do we have that data? How hard would it be to get the data to support classifying? And so the third main piece of help that we are seeking some investment in is a certain amount of money so that we can do some pilots of data collection that our modeling indicates that we will need to accomplish some of this basic work. So that is not meant to be, you know, actually going out in any meaningful way and trying to cover the landscape and get the job of data acquisition done. It's for us to really just take a few different types and explore how feasible or how expensive or non-feasible they might. So a couple of examples might be, won't be coming back and saying, hey, we're going to use this money to do the bathymetry on 3,000 lakes. We may take some work that was done on with Eagle and MSU to figure out, you know, hey, if we really go back and forth measuring the bathymetry of the lake, here's our precision. It may mean, hey, how many of those transects, how much sample intensity can we cut out and still get a really reasonable job mapping out the bathymetry. One of the things our group talks about is whether or not there's some water penetrating LiDAR technology that may make this much maybe more expensive possibly, but maybe less field intensive to collect. So the idea with the pilot scale data acquisition part of this is just for us to test out and get an understanding of how expensive and valuable different forms of getting our data. Just so we can come back later if we have a good framework and think that, yep, here's how it needs to go, that we get a better position to actually say, here's the resources it would take to get the data we need. So those are the three main pieces. It's been structured in a way that we're asking for an investment investment of $200,000. Like to use, roughly, say, 125,000 of that in some of the conceptual modeling, some linear expertise to help us with that. There's about $75,000 for pilot scale data acquisition. We would start with the conceptual modeling part first. But I think, again, some of this will be iterative as we work through that, being able to check out some types of data that could be usable and also be able to act still and tweak our conceptual models there. Right. We try to get that done in a 2-year time span from the time the investment is completed. And after that, our committee, this body, evaluate whether we're at, have identified a promising, viable pathway to keep developing this, or what. So I don't think, being honest with you, that this will lead us, come back to you in 2.5 years from now and say we have it all figured out. We'd like to propose a new investment module. But I also don't believe that without this work, we're going to do anything other than board talking about saying can't get it done. And for water, so our committee has decided that it's time to make investments in sources that we.
Do you have any idea of what area of the state or your water bodies you'd like to start with?
There are some notions. I wouldn't say any particular. I don't think any of our discussions have kind of revolved around like a spatial area of the state. But there was, I think, some good discussions previous in 2 or 3 iterations of the Water Council ago. Some general notions that you could take sizes of lakes and the something about the bathymetry and classify lake sensitivity, I think, somehow there. And so my hunch, Abby, I don't know, but my hunch would be if we can classify that and test it and see how it would function in a frame, the subsample some lakes in each one of those classes and try to do it across that spectrum.
Other questions?
Anybody online have any questions?
Not seeing any online. I guess one, not so much a question, but just a thought, thinking about some of the bathymetry work that DNR has been doing, that Eagle's been working on, as well as, a lot of the stuff that, I don't know how much data Pat Serrano has, at MSU from all of the years of work that she's been doing on limnology and lake bathymetry, but that'd be interesting to see, number one, how big of a data set that is, but then number two, how can that integrate with Eagle's effort to kind of create this, this larger database of commonly accessible information from multiple programs that we've got. I'm thinking about like, Jim, that list you pulled together had 300 some odd lakes with legally set limits. We've got a fair amount of data about those lakes, so I think that there's potentially a good starting point to start looking at that work, and that may help to inform some of the areas where you end up doing a pilot. Because it's always good to, if you're going to try some new way to collect data, testing it first on something that's already got good data is usually a good way to do that. So,
absolutely agreed, and I think that's been one of the things that we get stuck at. I'll say I think the data committee is pretty good about talking, really good at it. And it's a trap for us because we keep talking about the possibilities of the data. And without doing the modeling and the conceptual work, it's impossible to know how good of data really, how perfect of a bathymetry do you. We could go a direction where it really is, and I don't know if we will, but we could go in a direction where it's really percent of the lake that's shallow could be the sensitive metric. And if that's the case, there's a scenario where we use available aerial photos that could tell us that. But if we need to go in a direction that's very detailed in bathymetry so we can do volumetric stuff, well then you know, we'll have to take a look at all the data that does exist, figure out if it's good enough. So it's really, it's tricky. We talk about all the data possibilities.
You got a question from Todd?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yes, thank you. We had presented at the, I want to offer this to everyone so we're all on the same page with it, but we had presented at the model or the data collection committee on a project we did on Barron Lake with the drain commissioner in Niles. And we presented the work is already done. There's some significant cost savings and some really good data to mine out of that in this process. And we're just starting a second lake in a different county this year. So I would suggest respectfully, and I said this in the meetings before, that if you've got two pretty heavily studied lake systems already, those are good starting points with existing data that covers a whole lot of what we're already talking about outside of the limnology studies. But rather than reinvent the wheel, there's definitely opportunity here for partnerships. So I want to throw that out so everybody's aware of that, but there's already two very heavily studied lakes, both of them with major concerns over lake levels. So just as you're looking about deciding whether to spend money on kind of the investigatory process there, it may be extremely wise to start where someone's already started and maybe try to further that or use that information to further this process and be a whole heck of a lot more efficient with it.
That's a good idea.
Ryan, is your group familiar with the work SGS did on lakes using remote sensing? This cooperative project with DEQ with the Trojan status. And I don't know whether that would be of interest. I'm not sure that the lead author isn't at USGS anymore, but the Inland Lakes people, Eagle, may be aware of that, something worth checking out.
Nobody on our committee is over promising, yet to taking some real action and stuff. Any other questions on?
All right, so with the idea that, that time is getting short, we would have liked to have had more time to kind of do a presentation, give people a whole month to stew on this and come up with questions and vote at our next meeting. We're kind of working on our compressed timeline that we've got to have this report done by next month. Is there anybody who does not feel comfortable with moving forward on, or, making a decision on this recommendation? If you guys have had a chance to read it, and look stuff over in the last, week, 10 days since it's been posted and emailed out to everybody, is there anybody who feels like they can't move forward, on making a decision on this recommendation? I guess I'll ask that first.
Well, I guess I have a question first for Brian. Given the two suggestions that were just brought up, do you think that would change any of the language or consideration for language that is in?
My take on it is that we would use both. Absolutely. But it wouldn't change the nature of the recommendation. How that we're trying to use those things in the work. In fact, necessary investment. Just be used in.
So they'd be sources of data that would be part of the bigger collection of what you guys are looking at to assess what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Todd definitely presented some really spatially refined, detailed data of what water comes into one particular lake where it, I think that there's stuff within the state of Wisconsin did a central sand study that we would want to look at and may rely on pieces of it. But the investment here, it isn't really affected by what we will use to help ourselves through. Just sort of what we need as resources to tackle it. Definitely.
Maybe just tweak that language a little bit to make sure. Adding that language to this, I think would help everyone to feel better about it. I'm okay. I would be okay moving forward with this, knowing that at the next meeting or in between, we would like whatever additional language added to this, knowing along the lines that it's gonna be. That makes sense.
Is that something that you guys feel comfortable adding to the sort of background and explanation and recommendation?
If there's clarifying language. To strengthen it.
Todd, is your hand up again, or is it just still up?
I am very sorry. It was still up.
All right.
Take it
I
down.
have more questions. I just didn't want to miss you thinking that it was still up there. Any
No.
other questions, thoughts, concerns? Anybody who feels like they can't make a decision today on moving forward with this as a recommendation that'll go in the report that's going to be ready next month? All right, and hearing none, then the next question I'm going to ask is there anybody who can't live with this recommendation? Remember, we don't do this by Robert's rules with majority vote. We do it by consensus. So we attempt to get everybody to a place where even if they don't love it, they're at least okay with it moving forward. Anybody who can't live with this? And I am seeing none again. So we'll go ahead and we'll plan on having this added to the report in December. Brian and Megan and Kelly, can I rely on you guys to work on whatever language piece for the background needs to be added and get that over to me so that I can add it to the cleanup of the draft before I get it off to Christine to make it pretty?
As long as you know what he was talking about. As long as someone has that.
Or just reference to a project it's not really relevant. So I forget.
Okay.
Take the same way.
All right. Sounds good. Well, then, we'll move forward. This recommendation is going to be added to the report, and you'll notice that, because I received a copy of it, that it is in the draft that you saw and were able to review. So we'll wait for that updated language added in as soon as we get it, and move forward with this recommendation. Anything else from the data committee?
Just one clarifying point. We have 2 polls open right now to schedule 2 meetings. So just so the members know, one is to get an update from the groundwater clearinghouse to talk about the data, the types and the different things that they're doing, and then talk as a committee about implementing those. And then the second is a presentation from the group and to learn their work on inland lakes. So just so that we're clear, there's 2 polls open. If you haven't selected your times, please do that. And then if anyone that's not on our committee list is interested in either of those, just let me know and I can send you the polls. So we're trying to get those 2 meetings in before our next December.
All right. Anything else from the data committee? All right. Models committee.
All right,
You guys have numbers, you have all kinds of cool stuff.
we're ready.
All right. Carry it away.
So, we have 3 sets of recommendations that we'd like to go over. We went over these, last time. We had detailed presentations a number of months ago on all of this as well, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at it, consider it, and ready to move forward. The, next slide. So the first set is dealing with the half-max rule and the stream flow depletion apportionment. And the way the recommendation is written is it refers to a revised methodology, which is described in the write-up. I just wanted to summarize it here, just so there's no question about what the revised methodology is. So Zipper and some of his friends developed something that's called analytical depletion functions. And that consisted of determining stream proximity as to what should be included as for depletions, the depletion apportionment equations, and then finally the analytical model estimates stream flow depletion. So those are the three parts of the depletion functions. And we do those now in the existing methodology. We use the half-max rule. We look at all of the neighboring watersheds, pick the closest point on a stream. We use half-max rule to determine which streams we will deplete, and then we use the Hunt solution to calculate the depletion. So this revised methodology would take what's called the adjacent method, which is using polygons, to identify what nearby stream segments. It's not going to necessarily all of the neighboring water management areas, but it's looking at neighboring streams, so it's more geographically and hydrologically based. It uses what's called the Webb squared method to estimate what the total depletion apportionment should be to each stream segment. And then finally, it uses the Hunt solution, which is the same thing we're using now to calculate the actual depletions. So that's what the revised methodology is. Then the recommendations are, number one is to determine the feasibility of using the revised methodology in the screening tool. Again, it's not saying that we will do that, it's saying we're determining the feasibility of doing it. Develop techniques that would allow the timely calculation of this to be online. Again, it's got to be fast, it doesn't work. The internet tool. Determine the feasibility of conducting field investigations to show the improvement of the revised methodology versus the half-max rule. The second recommendation is determine the results of applying this revised methodology to the entire database of registered large quantity withdrawals. Evaluate what, if any, impacts this would have on water availability and potential ARIs, and then identify possible measures to mitigate the impacts on registered users while avoiding ARIs. The third part is prepare recommendations to this council regarding the implementation of the revised methodology and any new or revised policy is necessary for successful. I just need to take these one section at a time.
Yep,
One
yep.
group at a time.
Great. And so then, do you have a slide with, are all of your, budget pieces together in your presentation?
I didn't include it back into this presentation.
Okay,
I can go back over that. It's in the write-up.
it's in the write-up, okay. Can you go back over that just real quickly, just to make sure everybody knows what it is they're voting to, approve or not?
Okay, so this one is, Water Resources Division and Eagle will be implementing organization. Cost will be staff time, using existing program resources. So we're not asking for additional funding, allocating their staff time to do it. And we'd like to have it done within 1 year, hopefully faster, but 1 year is what set out. So no new funding.
All right. And you guys got a chance to see that last month and hopefully get questions asked and chat as you needed to. So what I will do is move directly into, is there anyone who cannot live with this recommendation moving forward?
I just have.
And does anyone have
or
questions before?
comments.
Yeah,
I guess
questions, comments, thoughts?
So we have some conflicting language in the recommendations, and sitting on the committee, I was totally in on okay, let's look at the feasibility of this. Is this gonna be a better way to calculate that? And I'm with you there. But then we get to number 3, where it says we're gonna prepare recommendations regarding the implementation of the revised methodology. Where in number 1, it says we're gonna look at the feasibility of doing it, and number 3 basically says we are gonna do it, we're gonna tell you recommendations on how to implement. I think that number 3 language needs just to be massaged a bit.
Yeah, I don't think it says that we're going to implement an assessment process. Look at the results of what it would mean in terms of ARIs across the state and what that might have in terms of policy implications and that account. Say, this is what's going to happen if we do this. I think we should do this.
I agree with, yep, I agree with what you just said, because that was what was said at the committee meeting. To me, that is not what number 3 says.
We'll see if that would go. Actually, having a hard time seeing it. You're expressing it as a problem.
you thinking of just, prepare recommendations if needed? for the water and supervisor health up to
So it would be like, bring back the findings to the Water Use Advisory Council, right? Because then to look at,
Maybe, let me try it this way, see if this addresses it. So the first part is determine feasibility. If this doesn't work, that's easy to come back and say, this doesn't work. It's a great idea, glad we looked at it, but sorry, it doesn't.
that's why I'm saying just recommendations to prepare the findings, right? To me,
Well,
that's clear.
Based on recommendations based on findings.
Recommendations based on findings. Just the way we use the word recommendations here in the council meetings, to me, the way it's written means we're gonna bring back our recommendations for doing. So we could clarify it by adding just a couple of words, that would make me feel.
I'm sorry, but I'm still not clear on the problem we have. This would be bring back the recommendations, just like this. These are recommendations to the council. We would come back to the council and say, based on all this work, these are our recommendations that would take into account all the stuff we look at. That's, it would be just like this. So we lay out, this is what we studied, this is what we found, this is what we adapted.
The way that it reads to me is we're gonna prepare recommendations, we're gonna bring it back to this council regarding the implementation of the revised methodology and any new or revised policies that would be necessary for implementation. Just the way it reads, to me, it says, we're gonna do this already. Like, we already made up our mind that this is, we're gonna go with this revised methodology.
Recommendation may be not to do. Recommendation may be not to use this method, even though it's better as impacts that are like no-go territory or whatever.
I guess
So
that's-
just
to
put
me, that's not-
recommendations,
that's
comma,
not-
based on findings, comma, and then continue on, because it's the findings that you're basing it on.
That's,
If that makes you feel better, then
Yeah,
that's what we should add.
Based on fine, okay.
Does that work?
is that,
I think that makes it a little bit more clear.
And you guys are good with that as a,
yes,
we could call that a friendly amendment if we were using Robert.
Right, I'm not saying, we can just add 2 words, that makes me feel a lot better about it.
makes Kelly feel good, we're good with it.
Okay. All right, other questions, thoughts, concerns? Right here, see if anyone's got their hand raised. All right. Is there anyone who cannot live with this recommendation moving forward? Looking at the feasibility of an alternate method to the half max rule. Which I cannot say I will do anything but celebrate once it's gone. All right. Got that recommendation in the report.
Okay.
Move on to recommendation number 2.
Yes, so the next 2 sets deal with downstream accounting and return flows. So, this again is the idea that right now, the current system just looks at a water management area and depletes from that. It will look at neighbors and it will make depletions from those. Those are all of the depletions that take place. It does not look downstream. So the next water management area downstream, it doesn't say, oh, all of these were accumulated up here, let's take some of them downstream. It does not do that. And so that is a potential problem why we're looking into this. So the recommendation is basically to continue to look into this problem. So the first one is complete an exhaustive literature review on existing research on observed or modeled downstream propagation of stream flow depletions. Number 2 is examine the relationships between long-term changes in index flows, index flow yield relative to climatic conditions that gauge streams throughout Michigan. And 3rd is conduct literature review and empirical analyses to identify and provide underlying support for the appropriate spatial scale for totaling cumulative withdrawals that potentially affect the index flow in each water management area. Questions or comments?
Questions, comments, thoughts? John, you've got a question. Hang on just a second.
I do. Dave, one of the things that we talked about was that we had a lot of stream gauges that are both functioning and not functioning right now. Should we say something in there that they're functioning today that we're looking at it? I'm just suggesting.
Actually, the answer to that's no, because we would look at historic gauges as part of this exercise.
No, that's true, but would they be used because are they functioning today, even though they're not? That's my question. Because yes, I agree with you. The historic data is probably more valuable than the other, but would we use them if they're not functioning today? In other words, will we go out and fix them? That's my question. I'm sorry.
That's not part of this recommendation.
Okay. So we're looking at just the existing data only, but we would then identify both the areas as well as period of time of that data.
I think the answer to the question is yes.
Okay, all right. I just remember that there were some that were not working and I don't remember if we came up with an answer on it. That's fine. I understand now. I'm fine.
Great. And Christine, sorry, you were asking a question as well?
Well, they had made a point of talking about the cost of those recommendations.
Do you have, do you want to cover?
Yeah, and I'm
cost
sorry
for
to
this?
include it in slides. I didn't think of that, but thank you for reminding me, because it is in the reports and the recommendation.
Yep.
Everybody has. So this, this one, it's a 2-year project. There's, the way this is written, is if we just went to MSU and said, hey, we'd like you to do this, it's about $282,000. But MSU has an agreement with the state, this partnership for ecosystem research and management, that if it goes through that, which is no reason that it couldn't go through that, then the cost is $180,000. So just put both of those in there, but we have the avenue for it to be $180,000 project.
Are you capitalizing on universal overhead, basically?
Well, it gets rid of the overhead
Right, that's what
costs.
I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
and overhead with universities is ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, it's high.
No, it's ridiculous.
Necessary to pay for the excellent quality of materials you're gonna get, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Whoever lays on it, let's take it.
catch back. All right. Is there anyone who cannot live with moving this recommendation forward? Having seen it last month, having now seen the budget figure for it. All right. Recommendation 2 down, it is in the report.
Okay, this next set is in the same downstream accounting area. And this it's much more technical in a different way because it's going to use models to look at flow rate attenuation, which is a fancy way of saying as you deplete water out of the stream, what happens as that stream water moves downstream. So there's a couple hypotheses that we're starting out with just to kind of explain our thinking. So that the way that water moves in channels is that if you take water out, the water level goes down. That has the ability to induce water coming from storage adjacent to the stream into the stream itself. So you won't necessarily see the same depletion downstream because you took water out upstream. Conversely, if you increase water can go out of the stream and into the storage on the side. So that mathematically or physically, rules of physics say you gotta conserve mass. Nothing is creatively destroyed, but it goes somewhere. I was trying to figure out where's it going. A lot of storage, point of storage, what is happening there. The second hypothesis is that the exchange of water with groundwater allows the stream to add additional storage. I think I've combined these two. The storage attenuates peak depletion while lengthening the response time of the system. Again, the mass is conserved, but peak rates are not observed. This is looking at it at the kind of bigger level of the system that as you're moving downstream, what's actually happening to the flow itself. So it's proposal is to look at mechanistically how do we explain what's happening with the stream flow. What's affecting the storage, what happens as you move downstream with in-channel storage. So that, the next slide is the summary of what this, study would do. So it's going to investigate stream flow depletions that might propagate downstream and combine the effect of, to affect downstream reaches. Mechanisms of attenuation will be modeled. Results of this testing will illustrate how in-stream processes may affect propagation, stream flow depletion rates. And so this is very much mechanistically oriented. I'm trying to understand the physics of the hydrologic system. And then the effects of the groundwater stream exchange can be modeled, will be modeled. The initial testing will explore the different combinations of aquifer and streambed characteristics representative systems in Michigan. We know there's a wide range of types of streams that we have in the state. Some have very little connection with groundwater. Some are perfect representation of the water surface. If assessing the nearest stream aquifer storage is determined to be a feasible mechanism through these simple models, then a coupled model of groundwater and surface water models from areas in Wisconsin can be used to illustrate the effects using more realistic models that are calibrated with extensive field data. So this study will build on itself and kind of learn as we go, kind of thing. It is also coupled with one of the modeling efforts. Excuse me, no, I take that back. It is coupled with that. But it will learn from itself and kind of build as it goes. Trying to add in more complexity and bringing in where there is field data using it. So the reason that Wisconsin is raised is because USGS has done a huge amount of study of this kind of question in Wisconsin. Geology is very similar to what we have in Michigan, so it's very appropriate. The recommendation then is to conduct a series of modeling analyses to test mechanisms that would lead to attenuation, stream depletion, and these will test hypotheses 1 and 2 by isolating the mechanisms, key features of the surface water, groundwater system that help propagate or attenuate upstream depletion response to be identified. By better understanding these features, we may identify stream networks that are more susceptible to upstream withdrawal and those that may be more buffered from upstream withdrawal. Identification of potential mechanisms also help inform analyses of existing data or design future data collection.
Great. And from your write-up, your budget for this?
It's $235,000. It's over a 2 to 2.5 year period.
Questions, thoughts, concerns? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you're trying to speak up online or raise your hand. All right. And again, we've had a chance to take a look at this. This was presented last month. Now we've got the budget figures for it. Is there anyone who cannot live with this recommendation moving forward? All right. Hearing none, we've got 3 recommendations in.
Great, thank you.
Anything else from the models committee?
The only thing else with the models committee is that we're anxiously looking forward to implementing the recommendations from 2 years ago. And we're working with the department as they're developing their path forward. They're talking with us, and we're providing whatever input they need and to getting those recommendations done.
I know, right? I'm so excited.
So that's it.
All right. Anything, Jim, anything else from you as co-chair of that committee?
No, the only other thing is we're still working on, with, consultants and with, Eagle staff on the aquifer performance test guidance. I met with some, consultants yesterday. Had some more suggestions to pass on to Eagle and discuss with them, and, hopefully one day I'll say it's done.
All right. Sounds good. All right, new topics committee. Anything from that committee? Don't think they had anything new, just wanted to give anybody a chance to speak up.
I did speak to Pat, and they have not met.
Okay. Then we've got Conservation and Efficiency Committee.
Yeah, so that's gonna be me. I think we had a data report, in there. So we continue to have our monthly meetings. We went through the latest, 2020 recommendations and, as far as making sure we're in alignment with the implementation committee, I know Emily is working really closely with James. And so, we took a look and polled our members about the scope of the project. We're looking at climate change, the impact of climate change on the different water sectors and the best management practices. And like the impacts of climate migration might have on businesses, business practices in the future. So, Pat was unable to attend, so we still are trying to figure out how he might be, or that group might be included. But we did exclude agriculture since they already have an annual process for updating those, and we already know that those are updated. Additionally, we took a look at aquaculture, and because they currently don't have best management practices out there like the other groups do, we moved them into their own bucket to move forward separately, because that's gonna take kind of more instructions, more conversation to figure out where they want to go with that. We are planning to invite them to one of our Conservation and Efficiency Committee meetings and really have a robust discussion with them about what they would like to get out of the process and kind of what their expectations are. So it's more of bringing them along instead of pulling or trying to push them along. So the project will, in essence, then just take a look at those best management practices per water sector through the climate change and the climate migration lens. We'll be doing some research on water conservation best management practices in the Great Lakes region. So what are other states doing? And really researching water conservation best management practices outside of that region as well in more arid states, just to see what sort of innovation practices are out there that we may be unaware of and possibly be able to bring into the conversation. Like, I can't read that. Oh, I think we're on to the next slide. I think I'll scoop down to the bottom and the other business stuff first. So Emily has been diligently working to put together, to go through all of our notes and what we've done. And she shared language for the biannual report. So what we would be able to include to you guys with what have we done over the last 2 years and kind of where are we at? So that language was submitted. We did go over that in our committee meeting, knowing though that everyone will have a couple of opportunities to put eyes on that and to make adjustments to that. As well as Simon and Emily are working also to share documents where they have to explain like what their department is doing. So we're kind of including that, and we're just taking a look at it through our committee. Like, are there red flags? Are there things that they could be adding that weren't added, or things that need to be updated? So that's what our committee is working on. And then of course we have hopefully the third time's a charm. We have went through the 2022 recommendation that we brought forward. There were some great comments and questions about that. So I believe that was sent out to everyone again. Basically, the changes that were made to that is we went through and included some better quantification of the water savings potential, right? So one comment Brian had was, what's the potential for this? Like, what are we gonna save? And so we were able to well, Young Suck was able to go through and, actually dig up data to find to quantify, you know, what can we expect from this program? There was another, concern about, is it a demonstration versus a pilot? And although this pilot program will be able to demonstrate to farmers and others how to save money and conserve water, this is definitely a pilot program, so we massage some of that language to make that more clear. And then there was another question in there about, this program is not meant to change the generally accepted agricultural management practices. Those are out there and they're looked at annually. What this program will do, though, is it will help to improve the implementation, right? So by showing the energy savings, the water savings, that will then be the catalyst to get agriculture irrigators to undertake and implement the GAP. So that all of that language was updated.
And I guess just a thought about that, you know, as this project, you know, if it's in our report, it gets funded, you know, we're able to get this up off the ground and it becomes something that has some useful information to share, just so that everybody else is aware of it. Those generally accepted ag and management practices. So they do have specific practices, like if you're following the GAMP, we want you to do these things. They also have an educational component to them. So for instance, they provide information on resources, you know, programs, links, you know, stuff that the universities provide, you know, books and manuals and other things that are out there that can help farmers with different ways and different means of being able to achieve those goals. And so when you say this isn't going to be something that's in the GAMPs, I don't necessarily think that it's something that would never become a part of the GAMP, but it may be part of that educational component. Like say, if, you know, a farmer who's interested in reviewing the efficiency of their system could use this program and, you know, and here's how, you know, and here's how that works. Similar to, you know, we've got recommendations, for instance, in one of the other GAMPs for manure management that says, hey, there's this cool program that MSU developed in cooperation with NOAA. It's called EnviroImpact. This is one of the ways that you can use to determine your potential risk for spreading based on weather forecasts. It's not required, but you know, it's a tool that's out there. So potentially this could become one of those tools that's out there that's mentioned in the GAMPs to help promote it, but also as an educational.
But the key is, it's not a new GAMP, it's
Right.
supporting
Right.
that.
Information to support the irrigation and water efficiency, water utilization. All right, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
I would say thank you for all the additions. Appreciate a lot of, this time it reads very focused on water, but you didn't lose the auxiliary. Appreciate those. Super minor clarification. I think it's similar to what you brought up on. Bottom of the recommended action right before the implementing organization section. At the end of the program, the Advisory Council, Water Conservation and the program determine next steps to expand and do you intend right now that this go broader, become established? Is the recommendation kind of including, this is something that we see wants to establish as extended to reach the entire industry, or might it just kind of stop at determine next, so like we'll evaluate the pilot program.
So, we'll evaluate the pilot program outcomes, determine next steps. Sure. I can, period to that, if that makes you happy.
Yeah, it's kind of a question, like, is it already expected that we will turn it into a program Or is it really like, let's try it, let's see how it works, let's see what the outcome.
I think with any pilot program, we're gonna run the pilot, right? And then there's gotta be that evaluation period. So that's why I'm 100% on board with moving the period.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, other thoughts, questions, concerns? Budget did not change for this, so. All right. Since we've talked this a couple times. Is there anybody who cannot live with this recommendation being in the report? All right. Recommendation as amended with the sentence is in the report. Anything else from our Conservation and Efficiency Committee?
That's it. Unless anyone else thinks I missed something, feel free to jump in.
All right. Last up for committee reports is the Implementation Committee. And Doug is not here, so I'm gonna pinch hit and cover the updates that we've got. So we've been working with Eagle and are gonna update, as I said earlier, the numbers for here's what we're doing with the money that we've already gotten. Here's the cleaned up numbers for what we're gonna need for ongoing expenses so that we've got agreement in the report on how that's gonna look moving forward. One other thing, and this is totally my fault, and this is why you should always have a minute to sit down in an airport and have nothing else to think about. Because I just remembered that I did not add to the draft report a recommendation that we made that this council approved to actually remove a couple of recommendations from the 2014 report. That was, and I didn't know if you guys wanted to move forward with that, since it's kind of already a done thing that we just decided we're not gonna do it anymore. We had talked about from the previous report that we weren't going to automate the WellLogic and water withdrawal assessment tool registration number together in order to tie those together the idea behind it was that it would make it easier to track down, hey, do these match? And we decided not to do that because Eagle doesn't need it, the industry doesn't want it. And then also decided not to include that as a process that then would be part of the water withdrawal assessment tool, because the Eagle staff are already able to move forward and do that manually. And so I wanted to ask the group, do we need to include that in our report that we've decided we're not going to do that?
Is that agreed upon in the meeting we had?
Yes. This was so early, it was actually, I think we agreed on it like in the early days when we were still allowed to have an online forum.
Yeah, that is a interesting and funny question.
Because it's a program that we've recommended, and then we took a look at it, and then we were like, this isn't really gonna work.
And if it was under the 2014. This is maybe.
Yeah.
Prior to us getting refunded. 2020 report is. Some time. Sure.
Right.
You know, if we voted on it, seems like, a mention of it, but it. Mention that and have. Any reader of the report follow along.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm worried about now, is now that I've thought, oh man, I forgot to include this, then I went, oh man,
I think if we.
am I just gonna confuse people by putting it in there?
I don't wanna, not mention something that we voted. I would say that vote's probably more of a functional thing, for the implementation committee to keep track of. And I think if we were ever to, sort of reverse something in like the 2020 report, then that would be different. I think in this case, see how we can find that. That's that.
Okay.
An internal resolution almost to not keep following that, those particular things.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think our minutes cover it as far as, public record, and we had the discussion on it. Add it to this report, try to explain it. It puts far more weight on it.
Yeah. So is there anybody who is super uncomfortable with me not including that in the report? It's double negative. Which makes this even more confusing. But I didn't want to.
This is Frank Kitawagishik, and I am not upset. I mean, I am, how do you put that? You didn't double negative. So wait a second, I am not upset.
There you go.
So it's
You
fine with
outnumbered.
me. But I just wanted to mention that could not figure out how to unmute my phone. I've been in the airport in Seattle, been on since 2:00. And I just wanted to let you know that everything that you've asked, if anybody was okay with the recommendations going forward, even though I'm not in the room to vote officially, wanted to let you know that I was fine with all of them.
Thank you,
So-
Frank, I appreciate that. And I do want to make sure, just for clarification, I know we've got the rules where we have to have in-person quorum for voting, but again, we don't operate by Robert's rules, so operating by consensus means I want to make sure and hear from folks who are online too. So thank you, Frank, for speaking up, and hopefully it's not too
Yeah.
chaotic over in your airport there.
Well, I finally figured out how to unmute myself here, and so I was able to do it. So anyway, but I'll let things proceed. I just wanted to let you know I was here, and I feel good about what's happening. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, the other thing I wanted to make sure and bring up from the implementation committee is another question for you guys on how you want to handle this. So the data committee provided kind of a little write-up, as you might have seen in the draft, on, here's stuff we've been working on, not recommendations, but just, here's kinds of some of the things we've been looking at. Efficiency committee just sent me theirs. And Kelly talked about that this morning. I have not changed any of those yet. Normally, when we talk about stuff that we've been working on or stuff that we're, whether it's a recommendation or just things that we've been doing as a council, I go ahead and make that on behalf of the council. I don't separate it out into this committee did this and that committee did that. And so I want to make sure, number one, that everybody's comfortable with me kind of going in and wordsmithing those a little bit, making sure that it reflects that this is work of the council and that we're not trying to, silo ourselves too much. But that number two, if there's anybody else who wants to submit anything in terms of this is stuff we've been working on, it's not a recommendation, but just, updates of, kind of how we've been strategically thinking about this. I don't want to foreclose you from the opportunity to do that because it is something that came up a little bit late in the process, and I'm pretty good at cut and paste, if it comes to, we need to add it in quick. So that's the other piece to this. Make sure that you guys are comfortable with me going in and changing those a little bit, making sure that they're reflective of what the whole council wants. And I'm looking at Brian, at you and Megan and Kelly, because you guys are the ones who have submitted those already. And then also particularly models committee, because I know you guys have been really active and have been doing stuff. If there's any additional material you want to write up in terms of big picture, this is some stuff we've been looking at.
I guess I'll turn it around and say something else, because I feel like, and is that major things that we've worked on have all resulted in recommendations.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
have
and
some
that's
other things, but I'm not really sure it's worth writing up.
not a requirement. I just know that Brian in particular had asked about, hey, there's stuff that we've been working on that's not really ready for a recommendation, but we want to make sure that the legislators understand that we're thinking about this stuff.
Right.
Um,
We do have ongoing,
Yep.
which we hope it finishes before the report, we could say that, but if it doesn't, I would just leave it.
right. Okay.
Because it distracts from the recommendations.
I would say for the data committee, doing it right for everybody, we just wanted to, didn't know where to set it.
Mhm.
Did not want to our discussions to other volunteering to draft, to try to characterize.
Oh, no, and it was very helpful in it, but I wanted to explain why I hadn't changed it yet in the draft and also make sure everybody's comfortable with me going ahead and wordsmith.
I would
that
say
a little bit.
wordsmith the way, and then everybody can get another.
Yeah.
Just did another issue travel.
All right.
I don't remember off the top of my head. You have everything.
Yes, I do. Yep, all right. And so that is the update that I wanted to provide from the implementation committee, but I've got more stuff for the next agenda item after I turn sharing over to you.
So I'll receive and then give you the back. And you're gonna now walk us through your draft.
Yeah.
rough first draft. and
Very rough first
Everybody
draft.
has it, you can review, contribute ideas electronically, by email, but this is really important as we're approaching our deadline. So we just want to walk through it and just see if that, just together it generates any comments or, action changes, things that we're missing, any of that from.
Yeah, and let me pull up the actual draft document here so I can be walking through it with you guys. I don't see it on the website. Did we decide that we weren't gonna post the draft because it's too early? But I emailed it out to all of you guys. So if there's anybody who did not receive a copy of it, please do let me know, because we're gonna send it back out in draft form to the same group. And so if it missed you once, it'll miss you again. And I wanna make sure and get comments from everybody who's got thoughts on it. Just a second here. Oh, you got it? Awesome. All right.
Did you email, this is Frank, did you email it out or did you have Sherry send it out?
Included in this.
It was included in Sherry's email of the materials for prepping for this meeting, but it is not posted on the website because it's that drafty of a draft.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, kind of like last year, we start with an executive summary that really is just sort of the high level for people who don't have time to read 40, 50, 70, 100 pages of materials. It's just a couple of pages that talks a little bit about what this council does, and then gives the brief summary of the recommendations that we have. Again, that continued funding for ongoing implementation, that's gonna get cleaned up with the updated numbers from the website, and from the spreadsheet, sorry. We've got the water conservation and efficiency pilot. We've got the 3 recommendations from, the models committee, which I'm gonna update with the budget numbers now that you've provided those. And we've got the data committee's research on inland lakes and adverse resource impacts. And then we also have the recommendation to maintain current index flows, which was an early recommendation that you guys made. So we'll have a total.
I want to just, sorry about interrupting, but on the inland lakes recommendation, I noticed that it's a 2-year project in one place and it's a 3-year project in another. And I didn't get a chance to ask that question when it was being presented because I couldn't unmute. But I'm assuming that that we're only asking for 2 years.
Yeah, I think the money would be spent hopefully within the 2-year period. The 3rd year was just kind of broken down as us as a group having the time with the results from it to work on what it means for next steps.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good question. And please do stop me because now I'm looking at Brian's computer and I may not see if you are trying to talk. So interrupt away if you've got questions. All right, so we've got. Ooh. Apple? No. Just really sensitive. All right, so we go through introductory materials, again, background on the, on sort of what the council does, why we were appointed, why the water use program is important. I tried not to just copy and paste from the 2020 report because, I thought I did a really good job with that, but I don't want to repeat myself. So it is a little bit different. The introduction does have kind of that total budgeting request for 23 and 24, which will include those updated numbers from the recommendations. And then we dive into sort of progress on the 2020 recommendations. That's where we go into a little bit more detail on, what the spreadsheet says, what we've been working on, what we're doing, how we're gonna spend that money that they've just appropriated to us, where it came from. And then also what are our ongoing expenses gonna be? So that goes into that further detail on that. Additional updates on the progress. And again, I'll clean this up now that you guys are comfortable with me doing that. I'll add in the pieces from the efficiency committee And probably just make this one section, you know, or actually, maybe I'll still break it out into two sections, because it'll be, here's what we're doing with the money you already gave us, here's what the committee's been working on. Additional updates on progress from 2020, including those two sections on behalf of the whole council. And then we dive into the meat of the 2022 recommendations. And other than just changing it from the committee to the council, making recommendations, I did not change anything. This is verbatim what you guys have presented. I am going to, for all of the ones that were approved today, I'm gonna use the updated versions. And if you guys can make sure with any amendments that were decided on today, so the wordsmithing and ending sentences and all that kind of stuff, if you guys can get that to me and make sure that I have those so that I don't forget them. I will make those changes and updates to each of the recommendations in the report and make sure that budget numbers and language is updated.
Laura, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
So, in the executive summary, are you gonna really focus on recommendations? Will that be highlighted there? And the reason I'm asking the question is that I think that it needs to be highlighted up front as to what we're recommending this year, as opposed to, we did all these things.
That's a good idea. I can reorder them, and put this year's recommendations first, and then make the last recommendation, the continuing funding. That's a good suggestion. All right. So again, recommendations, I grabbed them as they were submitted. And we'll make sure I have the updated copies of those for all of those recommendations, so we're working from the most updated copies. So that takes us down through page 28. If you guys are following along in the report itself. The next two things that I did have in there, and this is up to thoughts, suggestions from you guys, is I did include as an appendix to the report the recommendations matrix from our previous 2014 report. Because I thought it was useful information to talk about, hey, we've been working on this for a while. In 2020, we talked about the 2014 report. We should probably have in a nice, easy to kind of look at format, which is a table, what happened with those recommendations? Are they done? Are they not? Are we not going to do them? So I am open to suggestions, and you don't have to decide right this minute, but if you're looking through the report and you go, this is just, nobody's going to read this. I don't care about this. And we should not include it. Let me know, because it can certainly come out, but I thought it was valuable information to say, hey, we've been working on this stuff for a while. And here's what happened to all of those previous recommendations.
Laura,
Yes, sir.
along those lines, does the council want the final reports from the two MSU pilot projects from the 2014 recommendations? There were two pilot studies that MSU did for Eagle. One was the inland lake bathymetry mapping, the sonar transect survey pilot study, and the other was the GIS desktop analysis of the perennial versus not perennial.
And see, that one I do have as appendix 2, because I got that one, but I don't think I have the bathymetry study. And that was going to be my next question. So the next appendix 2, is the MSU review of what would it take for us to change from the current system. The water withdrawal assessment tool uses a 1 to 100,000 topographic map. It does, it doesn't by itself differentiate between perennial and intermittent streams. Is there a way that we could improve that? MSU kind of took a look at it. And that is included as appendix 2, because it wasn't an official recommendation of this council. This was from an earlier recommendation that we look at the feasibility of doing this. So there's no current recommendation tied to it. Nor is there one other than what the data committee is working on from MSU's bathymetry study from 2014. But if you guys feel like that's useful information to have, like, hey, this is work that happened, since that report was made and these recommendations were made, then then it should be included, but I put them in appendices so that they wouldn't be confused for, this is a recommendation from the council right now that now we're asking for money for.
I'm offering that up in case, since you've got the recommendation matrix from 2014, just in case anybody wonders, hey, whatever happened. So whether you want to include it, well, I think I sent the bathymetry mapping one
Did you?
and the NHDA one to you, but I think I'm on here too.
PH one, but I don't know that I have the bathymetry one.
I think I attached it to my comments on the draft, but if not, I'll reach. I can just send.
It seems to me, Laura, that we want to make sure it's available on the site. So we can, if we mention it in the report saying, hey, we did this, we followed up, I think we put a short summary in the report. Like the idea of being an appendix. But if the appendix gets really big, I'd make it a separate document or just say it's posted.
That's a thought. We could also just post those on the website and make a reference to them.
Thinking the same thing, especially scrolling, seeing a lot. I
Yeah,
think we could put those.
This
in
is-
as- Mention them and almost put like, appendix A available at the following web link. And then, when we do it, we have them on our website. If we keep the count and the file size down, because I want people clicking, want people downloading it.
That's a
I
good,
don't want it to be like 3.5.
that's a good suggestion, because opening up this lake bathymetry study, that's another 42 pages. I like that. Let's post those to the website, then just say appendices 1, 2, and 3 are on the website. Here they are.
Okay, clarification, which website?
The Water Use Advisory
The
Council,
council webpage or the water use program webpage?
the council webpage, because it's officially gonna be part of our report. It's just, we don't want to print all that stuff. And sorry, Frank, it sounded like you had a question or a thought.
I was just thinking that use these documents in the, as a link is a great idea. And I like that because somebody, I think it may lead to confusion if it's all part of one report.
Good suggestions, you guys. I like that. Short, sweet, simple. All right.
I guess one more question on that, and this refers to what we were talking about earlier. If we are going to include the 2014 recommendations as a link or elsewise, do we need to specify the two that we have decided to move forward on? Or do we need to remove those from that list of recommendations?
So if I remember right, I think there actually is a note in this spreadsheet that we decided not to move forward with those
Okay.
recommendations. I will double check that, but I'm pretty sure we have that in the spreadsheet already. So that would be a way that, if somebody was really hung up on that, and I can't imagine who would be, but just in case somebody is, you never know. People come out of the woodwork and they're like, this was my issue. That they can find that result. So yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so am I hearing, so if I make a cleaner draft based on the recommendations that I've received so far, and get that back out to you guys, do you guys want that on the website to be able to review, or do you want it by email? I would prefer email, but I don't want to preclude anybody who's like, boy, I really sure do wish I could just click the link and look at it. Because again, this is still draft. I don't want people to get confused. God, we're to start reporting that we're doing these things.
I have an opinion. This is Frank. I think email's better.
Okay. All right, so then I'm gonna do some, a little bit more cleanup to this. And get this, so look for, and I'm gonna get it to Sherry to send it out to the whole list, so look for an email from Sherry that has the draft of the report. And then, it'll have instructions on there to respond to me with your corrections. Please do go through it with red pens, because this is all of our report. We'll also include a page at the end that has, kind of who the council members are, so that, we had that in the last report and I think it was helpful. And then we'll, once we get some of those, once we get those comments in, we'll work on making the report pretty and we'll be ready to kind of show you guys for last opportunity, speak now or forever hold your peace, at our meeting in December.
You okay receiving emails from people, any kind of word, any suggestions?
Yes, absolutely. It's best if you can do it through track changes in the documents so that I can keep track of it, but if that's a difficulty or if it's like, I just need to pull out this one sentence and tell you, don't be hung up on that. Get the corrections to me however you can. But yes, please do send those corrections back to me, and I will incorporate them.
You have that you can get to Laura with a bit of time for the next meeting, the less work, less painful, our next meeting has to be, unless some of you actually like watch group work.
What's the latest you want to receive?
So I'm gonna do the cleanup from what we've discussed here and updating from the recommendations as amended, and I'm gonna get that out to Sherry next week to be able to get that to you guys. When,
You don't have to early now, maybe I'll just put it in your email. Share it. And put it in.
yeah, let's figure out a due date, because I also want to be sensitive to the fact that we've got a little holiday coming up in between now and then. Now in our December meeting, so yeah, we'll get a deadline for comments out with the email. So that you guys know how long you have to review it, because I'm sure everybody wants to take this home with them for Thanksgiving, right?
So,
Or just a reminder, our meeting is December 5th, we're a little early.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, I'm gonna do it quick, I'm gonna do it as fast as I can.
so the minutes will go out on the 18th of this month to hit our 10 days. You guys are gonna meet on the 21st for your executive committee to set the final agenda. And to hit the holiday in the 10 days, the meeting packet will go out on the 23rd, so if you want it to be that, or it'll be another mailing. So all that to say is you all will be getting boom, 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 a lot of things.
Yeah.
You mean
Which is
edited
fine.
version will go out by.
If I can get this out to Sherry and she can get it to you guys by, say, the end of the day on the 15th. Is a week enough time for you guys to review and get comments back, or do you need more time? I mean, because we could, since this is still in draft form, not post it with the meeting materials beforehand and just be working on the draft up to the date of the meeting.
I would not worry about for the meeting announcement. You should ignore that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes people like will suggest edits and you're like, oh, that's a really good point, right? And it sparks other.
If you guys are comfortable with having this not go out, with the meeting packet, then we can give you a couple of weeks, and then like if you could get it to us by the end of November, then we'd have a few days to get the last of corrections made before we meet on. This is the 5th.
Yeah.
Oh, please don't.
That's
And the 5th is a Monday.
Yeah.
There was a good reason for that, I remember.
So is 2 weeks enough time? I mean, it's gonna have to be, but.
I will say that you have enough to make the time. About a new draft, let us know. As long as there's at least a week, everybody's got different short amounts of time in there, we will do it, and we give you enough time to make all those, is really the hardest. Getting comments potentially from numerous people, turning that back around so we have just enough time to review it before the meeting.
Give us a week.
I think you need.
Yeah.
More than you do.
So if I get it to you by like the end of the day on the 15th, can you guys get your comments back to me by the end of the day on like the 22nd or 23rd before you head off for the holiday?
Something we think.
Well, because I'm a glutton for punishment, since the following week I have to be at our state annual meeting, I actually am gonna take this home with me for the holidays. Anything to not have to pack more boxes.
Okay.
Okay.
So you'll send out an email, you'll re-clarify the time sequence in
Yep.
there, everybody will try to get you feedback, you'll try to get us another version or
Yep,
version
I'll get you-
3 prior,
Yep.
with enough time for everybody to look at it before. Any other questions about the report for now? No. Correct.
All right,
Beautiful. You?
all right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
And thank you so much. I know the couple of folks have already sent me some comments, so thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it.
Okay, agenda item number 8. Update, and you want to fill us in a little bit. Questions have with the.
Yep. Yeah, good afternoon. I was requested to provide an update on the Aqua Bounty project. Aqua Bounty,
The aquaculture project in Williams County? Barely, in Williams County.
yeah, just over the border into Ohio, so this dot right here. There is Pioneer, Ohio. That's the location of their proposed East Wellfield. Ohio DNR issued a permit to Aqua Bounty for 4 wells, I believe, with a total pumping rate of 5.25 MGD. And what you see, so this is the 10-foot inner circle, whatever, is the 10-foot predicted drawdown. Next one out is predicted 5 feet of drawdown, and this is predicted 1 foot drawdown.
Who predicted it?
That's based, the 1 foot and 5 foot is based on the groundwater model by Aqua Bounty's consultant.
Okay.
They didn't provide Eagle with a basis to predict the 1 foot drawdown, so using TICE, that's our approximation. Those other black dots that you see within the state of Michigan, those are WellLogic well locations within the predicted 1 foot drawdown extent.
That's super right.
Domestic, some of them are, well, we've got type 1, type 2, type 3, and then domestic wells. I'm sure there's also some irrigation wells within that area of predicted impact as well.
I mean, your legend says that the small black black dots are all wells, but that the colored ones are your public supplies, the type 1, 2, and 3 public supplies. So.
That's mislabeled, so that's
Okay.
all domestic well, all other wells other than type 1, 2, 3 are the black dots.
Okay, so that would include the irrigation wells then,
If they're in WellLogic, yeah.
if they're in well lodging.
Jim, maybe you said it, is this an unconfined aquifer, or is it?
It's pumping from the Mission-Dale Aquifer, which is it's a glacial aquifer that underlies portions of Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio, hence the name. The groundwater model that was submitted by Aqua Bounty hypothesized that the Mission-Dale Aquifer is a deeper confined glacial aquifer. At least in some areas, there is an overlying shallow unconfined aquifer. Or
Is there agreement on that? Do our people agree that it's a? Does that get a phone?
that's a potential point of contention.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, so this is a very high level summary. So we did meet Eagle Office of the Great Lakes and Water Resources Division staff did meet with Ohio DNR staff to answer some of Eagle's questions about Ohio DNR's permit. Aqua Bounty is required to submit a monitoring plan to Ohio DNR for their approval. Ohio DNR did agree to provide Eagle with an opportunity to review the monitoring plan and provide our comments. I want to clarify that we have not received the monitoring plan to date. As one of the conditions of the permit, Aqua Bounty is required to install one set of vertically nested observation wells within the 10-foot drawdown zone inside the state of Michigan. Vertically nested with the deep well in the pump Mission-Doe aquifer and a shallow well in the overlying shallow aquifer. Ohio DNR and Eagle will share groundwater elevation data from observation wells in Michigan and Ohio. And Ohio DNR and Eagle are going to cooperate in developing the communication plan. So some of the next steps, Eagle and Ohio DNR will be developing a coordinated complaint response plan. We have, Eagle has a joint funding agreement with USGS to have USGS develop a regional groundwater model for the Mission-Doe aquifer. And included in that scope of work is the possibility of USGS installing additional monitor wells in addition to whatever wells are put in by Aqua Bounty. WRD also requested, and the Department of Attorney General has agreed to assign a couple of their attorneys to advise Eagle on Michigan's options under Michigan statutes as well as common law. As I mentioned, USGS is continuing to work on developing that regional groundwater model. We're going to be meeting with them about some potential observation well locations in the state of Michigan.
Communication plan, is there a lot of controversy over this in Michigan close to?
I would say yes, yeah. I've gotten a number of phone calls and emails.
And so a number of the Michigan wells are in the same aquifer as this one.
And I should clarify that it's yet to be worked, of all those wells in WellLogic in the state of Michigan, a number of them are very likely screened in the Mission-Doe aquifer. It's not entirely clear with some of those wells which aquifer they are screened in, or their pumps are set, so. But there are potentially several hundred wells that are potentially at risk. Other questions?
Jim's John. What's the date of this showing the well locations? Do you remember from them?
That is, well, this is generated by Eagle staff.
Right.
So they're part of the public notice comments that we submitted to Ohio DNR back in, I believe, March. March of
Okay.
2020.
All right, because we corrected all the WellLogic locations and that was done about 4 or 5 months ago. So I don't know whether or not this represents the corrected locations or the old data.
Good question. I'd have to.
Okay,
consult.
if you could check with them, because we did finish all of them in that area and also put in the scan logs. Excuse me.
The only other comment to make about that is that there has been a group of county commissioners who have been meeting on this pretty regularly. They formed an organization called the OMI Council of Governments. And so they are tracking, not just for this specific issue, but really sort of tracking what's the science, what are the gaps, what are the needs in studying the Mission-Doe aquifer writ large. And so they're really looking for information from the 3 states that, that we have about research that's been going on in the Mission-Doe aquifer. They want to understand this better, and they also want to be in that position to, you know, if there's funding that's needed, or if there's policy changes that are needed, or other things that, you know, that are needed to advance the science and protect that aquifer, they want to be involved in it. So, I've been attending that group's meetings for a while. James, I know, you know, we had talked briefly about, because they just want to understand the compact process better, that if there's a time that when they're meeting, that you can come in and talk to them about that, they'd appreciate it. But also just, you know that there's a bunch of folks that are kind of at the local government level that are also engaged in this specific, withdrawal request to understand it better, but also more broadly about, you know, how are we putting together the science and the mission dough?
And to clarify, because Aqua Bounty their treated discharge will be rerouted to the discharge to the East Branch of the St. Joseph River in Ohio. This is not subject to regional notice under the Great Lakes Compact because it's below 5 MGD consumptive use.
The vast majority of it is going right back in. And the other thing to clarify too is so far as I have heard, there isn't any real movement or interest in trying again for the, oh God, what's the name of the special designation for aquifers, sole source aquifer? There's nobody that I'm aware of who's talking about trying to make another application for this to be a sole source aquifer. But I think there are a lot of groups who, you know, who want to make sure that we're doing what we can to understand the aquifer and make sure that we're not overdrawing it.
It was an issue a long time ago.
It was.
I'm still working for USGS, Scott. We get that meet. You, model. It's done.
Mhm. Yeah, this is not new.
I would only add my own and my organization's perspective, and that kind of on this one to tie it to the Water Conservation and Efficiency Committee standards for different sectors, and there's a lot of differences within water operation. Water flow throughs, there's groundwater, and there's recirculating, and it's becoming common to see 4 or 5 million gallons a day facilities. It would end up happening with that's not too outside of Michigan. And again, at that volume, 5 million gallons a day, volume is just most expedient and cheap way to supply that water. And then it goes right out of the system. And I know it's a larger debate or discussion, but there's an ability to pay more capital up chillers and filters out of that does not necessarily have to happen. So that's where trying to establish some of the thoughts about water conservation, that section really do matter. They do matter in how we do or do not get this region. Really important stuff.
Well, the discharge standards are another big part of that too, you know, is that it can get expensive real quick to meet the water quality discharge standards. If you are trying to recirculate the water, if you're trying to, you know, if you're trying to be efficient, then a lot of times you could be kind of unintentionally signing yourself up for a lot more cost and headache to try to make sure that water is clean enough to let go back out of the system.
Discharge is big, but to use, and I mean, at the same time, we just, you know, trying to invest and trying to see if we can get water efficiency gains, efficient gains, and electricity gains off of just tweaking how some of the sectors use water, showing it off as conservative as possible. Some of these proposals, something, and they're all alternatives, and that's it's really something. Any other questions about this update? Fine.
Just show the next steps again, Jeff.
Sure.
So, yeah, to recap, Ohio DNR and Eagle will be developing a response plan for complaints. USGS may be installing additional observation wells in Michigan in addition to whatever Aqua Bounty installs. The Department of Attorney General has assigned some attorneys to advise legal on what state of Michigan's options are. Their statutes and common law, and then USGS is developing a groundwater model for the Michigan law.
What's the status of that, the model?
Early on. Ralph, are you still on?
Jim just started some going on for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Multitasking, but I'm here.
Okay, so the question was, status of the USGS modeling effort for the mission note.
Well, I think Chance is also on board here. He's the modeler working with Howard Reeves on their team. So let's see, is Chance still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so maybe you can provide an update there. Thanks.
Yeah, so right now we are still working on developing the initial steady state model, and that's pretty much where we want it to be. We're looking at here within the next few weeks, starting to look at our parameter estimation and our calibration using the observation data sets. So the foundation of the model at this point is there, and we're hoping to fine tune that over the coming months and have some outputs generated for that here not too long after the start of the new year.
Thank you.
Okay, there aren't any other questions about Aqua Bounty. I'd like to actually put something just a couple minutes back on, and I forgot when you asked about the agenda items. It's not really, I'll do it miniature, but since we're kind of at a department state, Jay Wesley's with us today and mentioned to me before the meeting that you have an issue or topic coming up that you might want us to make time for on December 1, and a little bit about what it is. It is an important and interesting one. We've talked about a little bit in the past, but it's kind of the first case scenario where this function of the statute will come into play. I think it's really important. So Jay, I'm sorry to put on the spot, but it's really important. And if you don't mind spending just a minute or two to kind of mention, I think it would have everybody's.
Yes, so this goes back to an issue on Prairie River. There's a water management area 20781 that's been in review. It's currently listed as warm water stream. And after lots of data collection, fisheries data and water temperature data, recommendation is to designate that as a cold transitional. So that that recommendation has been made by Eagle and DNR, but there was no established process to that. And so we've been looking into it. Under statute, it was supposed to go to the Natural Resource Commission. There's been some executive orders since then that have removed some of the decision authority from the NRC and placed them with the department, which is the director. This decision will be going to the director. Process that we're recommending is that there will be a recommendation memo that goes to our director to make this temperature classification change. And that will go to our NRC as well for information, and that will allow the public to comment on the recommendation. 30 days to do that, and then the director will make the decision. So we're planning on bringing this memo to NRC in December. At the same time it goes to NRC, we'd like to send it to the first chance at it. We're still trying to figure out where comments go and all that, but I'll be happy to be on the agenda to give you more information about the background of this issue and how process and how if you have time on the agenda in December, that would be awesome.
I don't get to make those decisions by myself, but I'll advocate. It's important.
It's precedent setting. This is the first one that's gone through this process.
It's a really important change.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure you'll have our full.
And if you can get us information ahead of time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Sure there's questions on that, but we won't, all right, thank you very much, Jerry. Okay, so now there's some, kind of next steps, housekeeping. So the easy part of that is the remaining 2022. This one is December 5th. That one will come up quicker than normal. Mentioned earlier, it's a little bit sooner. So you pull that one booked. And, an agenda, get it out, but expect that a big part of it will be through the report. Sure that it's, the motion. 2000, as far as 2023, Christine, could you help me by, helping me remember what we talked about at the last one? It's on our minds, we're trying to set them up. At least the first one or.
Yes, we talked about February, and that was what I think this part.
And be aware that the Concom room is not available the second Tuesday and the third Tuesday in February 2023.
Do have Lee Walker.
And I think the other discussion was how often you were going to meet. I think maybe you had been quarterly and then it shifted to every other month and then we've almost been monthly because we had this. So
We've been meeting every 2 months and then every month, as the time for the report gets closer.
So we love everybody's ideas. We're thinking that we will start back probably at this point, thinking bi-monthly, starting in February. By that point, we will have a little bit better idea of who we all have to send our letters to. That's reappointment. So that's kind of first order, but we also suspect we can continue operating after. I'll have that to talk about and then we'll start setting them up bi-monthly. At least for a little while until we determine if we need more. That also brings me to other item that we have here, special call for topic. So you all have
Actually,
been,
Brian, before you move on to that, just one more thing about our meeting agendas for next year. In the past, and we don't have to do this any one given way, but in the past, we have had the meeting location rotate before. It's really just a matter of who's got a big conference space that they can reserve. And so I think that that's something that we should be open to as well is, it is awesome that we get to meet here downtown because it's a pretty central location for everybody. We've got the big conference room down here, but if there are other folks either in Lansing or elsewhere in the state, if you've got space that you have available to host and we can make the arrangements for it, I would like to have people consider opening that back up to be able to host these meetings in other locations as well. And that's just a matter of, once we've got our dates kind of figured out for the year and we'll get those dates out to everybody, then just checking with your organizations and seeing what your availability is and we can kind of fill in those TBD locations as needed. Thanks.
This is Frank, and building on what you've just said, some of in previous councils, we've actually rotated our meetings around and had field trips as part of them. And there have been some, we should think about if there's any programming that we want to do where we might want to, look into where we might meet other places if there's some special agenda item or something that we want to do. We should consider that as well. I remember a visit to the seed facility there, and the hosted down there in the DeKalb seed facility, and our discussions that were there. Learned a lot in that area, and the tour that we had, I thought that was really good.
we agree, we're wide open to suggestions. So if any of your groups have some ideas of venues, field trip exposure opportunities, please get them to us. And Frank, we're actually all looking around and wondering if you're gonna invite us to beautiful northwestern, North Michigan somewhere.
Jim's about to invite us somewhere too, right?
No,
Come fishing with you?
Yeah, I probably could arrange that, so.
down the road from there.
Well, there you go. We can come visit you.
Yeah, I was gonna just ask, kind of backing up a little bit on meeting dates. Since we need a quorum in December, could the announcement that goes out have some kind of mechanism to poll people about whether they're gonna be here in person? We really need to know ahead of time, because some of us don't live here. And we need to be here, we will. Have to be. And it's December, snow, whatever. I would a more formal way of letting Sherry know if people are gonna be here in person. That's possible.
That sounds like a good idea. This is Frank again. But I wanted to find out, in the question that came was said, if we couldn't be there in person to send our alternate. I don't have an alternate, but I wondered what's the procedure for selecting or getting an alternate? Is there a formal procedure for that? Because
We've reviewed that, Frank, and you, basically what anybody should do is to notify one or more of us as co-chairs and just at any point say, so-and-so, this, first name, last name will be serving as my alternate. So for example, if Megan hadn't showed up as our last person today, we probably would have said, Frank, how do you feel about Jay Wesley serving as your alternate since he's in the room? We have no formal, there's nothing really formal. You have the ability to assign an alternate, so, if you can't make a future meeting, and maybe we should have been even more detailed. I think we highlighted it in yellow in our last email and said, if anybody can't attend, please send an alternate. But you can.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. And I can tell you right now on the 5th, I'm not going to be able to be there in person. We're meeting with the governor's office and the governor up in Sault Ste. Marie on the 5th and 6th. And so, I probably would be able to call in again, but I ought to have somebody in the room to vote for me, so.
I think my best guidance for you is review the last draft of the report that comes out to you. If you have any critical issues with it, make sure that you send us an email letting us know what your comments are and whether you give the final report consensus. Let us know a little bit of that. And then, Jim Milne's always here. So, you could always deputize Jim Milne, or Hannah, or Abby. Somebody who could vote for you. But we should know.
Well, you truly can staff be deputized because
Yeah, and that's actually what I was gonna bring up too, is understanding, and this was just something that internally the council has decided to do. If your alternate votes for you, you can't come back later and say, that wasn't how I intended to vote. So ideally, what you want as an alternate is somebody who's either in your organization or at least somebody that you're talking to on a regular enough basis that you feel comfortable that if they're gonna vote in your stead, that they're gonna vote the way that you would want them to vote.
And that's where I mentioned, like, if you could let us just know who it would be and how you would vote.
Yeah.
Right, as much as possible, really preferably it is somebody from your organization who would go and represent how you've tracked the issue and would vote. But if you also let us know a little bit, that helps.
Yeah, because about us getting.
I'm thinking, what I'm thinking is that it's a mentoring situation as well. And so I've been thinking that I ought to do that and have an alternate that's from a tribal alternate that's there. And so that on these occasions when I can't be there in person, I could have somebody there. So anyway, I think that answered my questions, and I will make sure that I have somebody there on the 5th, although I may still be on the phone. So Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Frank. And that's just a good message for everybody. And I know it's hard for any organization to sink 2 people's worth of time and commitment into this, but it's always going to be good to try to have somebody within your group that you talk to about these issues that falls along a bit. We appreciate through the years that it takes quite a little bit of time to get caught up and understand all the complexities of it. So it's always a good idea. True functioning in your order. So for the 2023 call for special topics, that's essentially in remembrance that there have been several topics that members have brought up wanting to talk about, wanting to have time on agendas to discuss, review, explore. And in the last maybe 4 to 5 months, we've been pretty focused on just trying to get through this report of recommendations. So we, a couple of occasions, put people off and said, hey, we'll have in just January. We reconfigure. But we're not going to put it off longer than that. So this is our request to all of you. If you have had items pertinent to this program that you want to spend time on, please let any of the co-chairs know. We'll share them, or anybody on the executive committee, teams. It doesn't really matter who you get them to, but let us know what those are. We're going to collect those. We're going to use them to try to set our agendas, and we'll get back to people who recommend them with some feedback about how to structure them. We may say, okay, well, you want to talk about this, that'd be great. On that topic, we know that this other person or these 2 other people probably have interest in talking about different components. We're going to try to own the responsibility to help coordinate, but get them on. So if there are special topics that we put off that you want, please let us know. It'd be great if you could within the next couple of weeks to a month. That would be ideal, so we can start planning that.
Hi, this is Frank again. I have a suggestion, and that is one thing that we've talked a lot about agricultural uses and domestic uses, but we have not talked much, and we haven't looked into industrial uses and management of water. And I'm wondering if there might be something along that topic that we could come up with. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. All right. That's it. Please do send any ideas or desires that you have to that. That moves us to item number 10, which is open comments for anybody. And it does not have to into an agenda. Try to keep these to about 3 minutes. If you have any interest from anybody in the room or online, please raise your hand.
Not seeing any.
Right. Once, twice, times, we need open comments and accept a motion to adjourn this meeting. So moved, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, stay by yourself. We're out. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all the efforts to get us a quorum today so we can move on. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Jim Milne clarification on what I noted.
Sure.
It's 80, we have 84% of the county done. It was the complete southern portion of Hillsdale County that's done. And 54% of them were not in the correct location. That's in the well logic locations. And that was on September 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the digital input, we put it off because we didn't get any direction as to wanting to need it right away. So if you want that, let me know so I can get that done.
All right, thank you, Jim.
All right, Jim, thanks. I'm sorry.
Thanks, John.